Hi there. My name is Susanna Kashach. I'm a professor here in the School of Nursing, and I'm going to talk to you today about the article on dialectic pluralism. So, Inayat and McCaffrey, 2023, make a case for dialectic pluralism in nursing. And the idea behind dialectic pluralism is to find a way to talk about the diversity of worldviews in nursing in a way that actually um, uses the tension to build more innovative and complex solutions that are relevant to nursing scholarship and practice. So let's learn a bit more here. Worldviews in nursing is something we've covered in some of the first weeks of class. And the authors in this article talk about it as knowledge, make clear that knowledge development occurs under a certain worldview. Multiple worldviews in nursing exist, and therefore there is growing consensus that our discipline can be thought of as a pluralistic discipline. And just returning to this last point, I want to make clear that something that the authors emphasize is that we always develop knowledge from within our worldview. And this has many implications. One is that it can make us a bit dogmatic if we're tied to our worldview and not open to other worldviews. But it also means that whatever knowledge is developed needs to be assessed and understood from within the boundaries of that worldview. The authors also argue that opposing worldviews are often seen as a source of conflict, or actually a source of conflict, but they're also seen as a weakness. For example, in terms of a lack of a shared culture or lack of a shared vision in an organization or an area of practice. But even though opposing worldview can be a source of conflict, if we can embrace the differences and what this means for different valuing and the complexity of the issues we're trying to solve, we can start to think of opposing worldviews as offering as a big strength to nursing. So, what exactly do the authors mean by dialectical pluralism? The authors identify that under the frame of dialectical pluralism, the nature of reality, or what we sometimes call the ontology or an ontological worldview, is ever changing, and it has multitudes. For example, from a dialectical pluralism perspective, we would understand the nature of reality as sometimes intersubjective, sometimes subjective, sometimes objective, sometimes tentative, and so on. So because the nature of reality is constantly changing and in contradiction and in flux, then the type of knowledge we develop or what counts as knowledge or epistemology is also changing through dialogue and through co-construction and negotiation with others who may have opposing worldviews. Dialectical pluralism has to do with questioning and dialogue towards intermediate and integrative understanding. So what that means is that we are always learning, and there's a kind of humility that has to go in to how we approach issues, understanding that when people see things differently or see things more tentatively, the answer may be all of the above, none of the above, and only one. So that's what we mean by kind of intermediate, and integrative. Another way of thinking about integrative is kind of holistic, or all pieces kind of coming together. So we can think when we're trying to think from within a lens of dialectical pluralism, we might think of claims as being partial rather than absolute. We might think of claims or knowledge ideas being as tentative rather than having immediate acceptance. And something important to remember is because knowledge is developed from within the domains of a specific worldview, all worldviews may be seen as legitimate, but that does not mean that they can be blended together, that they make sense together, they're incompatible or incommensurable. What exactly do the authors propose as the process for conducting dialectical pluralism? Well, they propose that there are three main ways that we can enact dialectical pluralism. The first is intrapersonal dialogue. So this is inner work that we would do through reflection, through being open, through competing values or priorities that we may have, for example. And the authors also distinguish between differentiation, which is that kind of identification of different values or ideas that we might hold, and integration, which is perhaps a theory of how these things might come together or how they might complement each other. The authors also talk about interpersonal dialogue. So from a dialectical pluralism perspective, conflict can be very constructive and an important source of tension that can lead to creativity, but it does require collaboration that kind of changes. So rather than us, dominating or convincing another person of our position, the positions are kind of seen as ones that can coexist and offer something new or different. Another component of dialectical premises is axiological premises. So axiological is kind of a fancy way of talking about the dimension that our own personal and our social values or ethical values play into how we think about knowledge and what counts about knowledge. So what are the implications for nursing knowledge according to the authors? So the authors argue that there can be kind of more of an honoring of diversity through debate and collaboration, and a value of difference as well. They also argue that the dialectical pluralism can offer more of a framework to actually acknowledge that there are different perspectives that can be valuable towards contributing to a solution. And lastly, they may make visible what's hidden nursing knowledge. So sometimes if you imagine an area of practice, a nurse that maybe is sees a way of a particular organizational policy is not fitting with their own values or their own beliefs, even if it enhances patient care, may kind of keep that knowledge private. So in an area of practice where tensions and conflicts in values are seen as important points of conversation, there could be more of a conversation about how to make knowledge more context specific and relevant for the environments and the patients that we're working with, as well as the nurses who provide the care. The authors also argue that there's relevance also for practice and research. So one challenge that we might see when people are only operating from within one worldview and perhaps only working with colleagues operating from within worldview, approaches may be overly simplistic in a way that doesn't address the complexity of the issue. So bringing in kind of the tension and the conflict between worldviews can promote a more complex understanding of an issue. And it could, on that same note, it can also make for more comprehensive care, holistic care, and understandings of care that are more in relationship with patients, more aware of the values that patients bring and how that might change or transform how care is offered. And lastly, it can provide a framework for flexibility and adaptability and collaboration in care planning. So I'm curious to know, now that you've learned a little bit more about dialectic pluralism, can you imagine an issue in your own area of practice where this might be helpful? Why or why not? Thanks for listening.